Club. Welcome to our members from Texas and Michigan, and welcome to any guests that were able to join us today. As you've heard in some of the discussion, yesterday was a big day for us. May, you know, is our busiest month. And yesterday we started it out very, very strongly with the return of our perennial plant sale. We have this every year, but of course last year we didn't get to have it, and we were very concerned we wouldn't have a good participation yesterday, but we did wonderfully well. And I want to thank the chairperson of this year's sale, Debbie Vigas, and her co-chair, Lynn Beamer. They put in lots of time, energy, and great ideas to make this sale a success. As you noticed, it was in a whole new venue. As Deb mentioned, they were fighting the wind, blowing the tags out of the plants the entire time, and then running around with the tag trying to find out, okay, now where is the bleeding heart? I've got the tag and I can't find the plant. And they did it, and they did a wonderful job of it. So I personally want to thank them for myself, but also for the club. And Deb, do you want to say anything about your sale?
She's muted.
Are you there?
She's muted.
Deb.
Yes, thank you.
I'll start talking about you.
Okay, the plant sale this year was a really big success, and I want to give huge thanks to the people who donated plants, because if you don't have plants, you're not going to have a plant sale. I don't have the final numbers, but we were estimating that we had probably between 900 and 1,000 plants. We had a lot of plants. And we had some people who donated up to 75 plants. That takes a tremendous effort to dig up things and pot them or to grow them. So that's what really helped make this plant sale a really good sale. We sold probably 85% of them to 90% of them, and the rest are being donated to a plant sale later this month for breast cancer. So every single plant that was donated has a home. So that's a good thing. And I also would like to thank my co-captain Lynn. She has more experience than anybody in doing this plant sale, and there's no way I could have done it without her. And also, thank you to everybody who came up to help set up and run the plant sale. This is a group effort. There's a lot of work to be done, and everybody really contributed. And thank you, God. We had a beautiful day on Thursday. It really helped bring out the shoppers, and I hope everybody had a good time. I know I did. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. And just a reminder, all of you ladies and gentlemen who donated plants to the sale, just like when we donate food to the potlucks, you can take 2 hours of volunteer time on Volgistics. I know the person who donated 75 plants wants more than 2 hours, but you get 2 hours for donating plants. And of course, those of you who work Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, you get to count all of those hours on Volgistics as well. Next, coming up this month is our second, maybe it really is our first most important day of the year, and that's planting day. Our annuals are delivered to Meadowbrook Hall on Monday, May 24th, and on Tuesday, May 25th, we plant all of those annuals in the gardens. Now, remember last year, Nikki and Kim and a few of the other employees from the hall, they planted all of our annuals, but this year we get to do it ourselves. And I am asking, even if you are not a normal, regular gardener in the club, if you could give us some time on Tuesday morning, May 25th, there are so many jobs that need to be done. You don't have to get down on your knees and dig a hole and plant a plant if that's not what you want to do. But you can certainly help us to put Osmocote in the holes, deliver water to the workers. We're looking at doing sack lunches for the workers. So there's lots of different things you can do to help us out. So please mark your calendar for May 25th. starting about 8:30. And anybody who's ever participated in planting day will tell you, not only is it a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. And the camaraderie between the gardeners is worth your time. So please plan on joining us on May 25th. Also going on this week, you received an email about 2 weeks ago that we are hosting our first online marketplace to sell club clothing. Remember, in the past, the clothing was sold whenever we'd have an event, either in the tent or sometimes in the hall, and it was very limited. This time, we now have a full catalog online of club wear. It will be monogrammed with Meadowbrook Hall's name and the club ID. It will be offered in red or black. Gardeners may choose either red or black. We have samples in the garden garage if you want to try them on. They're mainly unisex. So you might want to look at some of the items to gauge the sizing before you order. And normally, we had originally planned on the sale ending this Sunday, but because all of the samples didn't come in on time and have just finished being delivered, we're going to extend the sale until the end of the day, Wednesday, May 19th. You're going to get an email that'll remind you of the link. You go to that link, you can see the items that we have available. You place your own order, you pay for it with your credit card. It will be delivered to the hall, packaged with your name on it. And it'll be about 2 weeks after we close the sale that our items will be available. So please show your spirit like you used to in high school and wear your Meadowbrook Garden Club wear. You can wear it in the gardens, of course, but I even wear mine when I'm going to the grocery store. So now's a good time for you to update your wardrobe. If you have any questions about the clothing, you might want to send an email to the club's email account. That's MBGC, Meadowbrook Garden Club members @gmail.com. And someone will get back with you to answer your questions if need be. Okay, so before I turn the meeting over, I would like to remind you to mute your microphone from this point on. Turn off your camera, although it's wonderful to see you all. Post your questions for Craig in the chat link like we've done in the past. Somewhere on your screen, you're going to see 3 dots. When you click on those dots, a menu bar will drop down. One of the menu's choices is chat, and you can type in your question. And Beth will direct the questions to Craig at the end of the presentation. Okay, so now I would like to introduce our Director of Programs, Kathy Sabansky.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our May meeting. Craig Elston is a Michigan native. He's always been interested in nature from his youth on his grandparents' farm. At a young age on the farm, he became interested in raising butterflies. He's been interested in growing plants. He's a great interest in native plants. He's been leading interpretive hikes at the Hudsonville Nature Center since the mid-1990s. He also led walks and lectures and slide programs at other nature centers, including Hoffmaster State Park's Gillette Visitor Center, Frederick Meyer Gardens, the Michigan Botanical Club, and various MSU county extensions in West Michigan. As a member of the Hudsonville Parks and Grounds Committee from 1988 and has been the naturalist for the city since 2001. He has earned his Advanced Master Gardener from Ottawa County and In 2003, he was privileged to be part of the Kent County MSU Extension Master Naturalist Program from its inception, developing and writing the Prairie Environment segment, which is now a 4.5-hour class. His interest for Michigan native flora is not just observation and photography, but propagation and cultivation of these marvelous gems. He finds it exciting not only to learn about these habitats, but their inhabitants, and also share with others. Craig has served on the Gillette Nature Association board in the past and is currently serving as the second vice president of the Wildflower Association of Michigan. He is also president of the White Pine chapter of the Michigan Botanical Clubs. Today, we are privileged to have Craig speak to us about butterfly gardening, and the needs of butterflies in all stages of life can be met and attracted to your yard, even if you have a small apartment or many acres. And the importance of native plants for butterflies will be talked about. And this is drawn from a lifelong interest in butterflies and enjoying the surprises that can come from successfully attracting them. Welcome, Craig.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. Before I get started, I will clear up a question I heard going on about the picture you see. This is actually heliotrope, the flower, at Monticello in Virginia. And even though I have not seen zebra swallowtails in Michigan since the mid-1970s, they are native to our state. So that being said, let's get into the program. My interest in butterflies really kicked in after Ranger Rick Nature magazine published an article on raising and tagging monarch butterflies in July of 1968. This has started a lifelong interest in raising and observing butterflies. The article included photos and description of monarch's life cycle, which I still enjoy watching and photographing to this day. It also included instructions for a shoebox rearing cage, which my mother didn't always like finding under my bed. And some 30 years later, I moved into fly cages, which are big enough to allow the butterflies to fly after they hatch without damaging their wings. By the time I was 10 years old, I also was collecting and raising monarchs and spicebush swallowtails. While it's becoming harder to find larvae in some developed areas, I do still enjoy raising and releasing them. By the time I was 10 years old, I was also collecting all kinds of butterflies, moths, other insects. And as I look back, I can see how over collecting can harm populations. Today, I maintain a smaller collection just for educational purposes. There are butterflies and moths that I saw as a young boy that I would like to see today. As we get into this a little bit idea on how many butterflies there are and how that can affect what we're doing. Depending on the resource that we look at, there are between 17,500 and 20,000 species of butterflies worldwide. There are about 725 species occurring in North America, north of Mexico, with about 575 of these occurring regularly in the lower 48 states. Michigan historically has 159 species, with 137 of those year-round. We normally think of the monarch as the main migrant, but some other species migrate small distances, such as like the giant swallowtail does not overwinter well further than the bottom tier of states in Michigan, but it does fly in from Indiana during the summer. Some, like the Carner blue, are host specific and therefore can only be found in certain habitats. The larvae feed exclusively on native lupin. They are found in dry, sandy prairies and pine oak openings with lupin. This is particularly as a Michigan Nature Association property in Newaygo, which is called the Carner Blue Sanctuary. And if you get the dates right when they're flying, it's not too hard to find them there. We have several locations here in West Michigan where you can find the Carner Blue. Others may host on several species and are found in a variety of habitats with or near appropriate larval host and adequate nectar sources. So I'd like to start with a question. What do you think about when you think about butterfly gardening? And if we were in person, I would open this up for a minute for some questions, but just think about that. There are many different ideas and all of them may be right, depending on your goals and interest. As native prairie plants are excellent butterfly attractors, this natural prairie would be a fine butterfly garden, but it would be even better with some surrounding woods, edges, and maybe some wetlands. So a good diversity, if you have natural areas, good diversity is always good. But you can still attract butterflies to your yard. During our time today, I would like to share some information for gardening for butterflies based a lot on personal experience, as well as some things that I have researched and read. We will look at some landscape principles and practices relating to butterfly gardening, as well as the butterfly needs. And this is mainly to help you get started and to know what directions to go. So another question is, why do you want to garden for butterflies? And some of these questions may affect what we talk about landscape practices, how serious you are and how far you want to go with this. Do you just want to settle for some stopping by for nectar? This works quite well in my mother's yard. You'll see I promote native species. My mother has beautiful gardens full of non-native species and she still gets a lot of butterflies. And hopefully we'll explain a little bit about the native species. Or do you want to provide for the complete life cycle from egg, larvae, placed to chrysalis or cocoon if you have moths involved, to the adult? Where you live and the surrounding habitats may determine what species you attract. Some species do, however, travel long distances and may show up unexpectedly in your garden. And this is the giant swallowtail I mentioned. They will lay eggs in Michigan. I'm near Grand Rapids, so even that far north, they will come and lay eggs, but they don't always survive our cold winters. So traveling from northern Indiana, they're covering about 3 to 4 tiers of states moving northward. And as I've already mentioned, there are 2 ways to attract butterflies to your yard or garden. The first is to attract adults, which is most commonly thought of in terms of butterfly gardening. This can be an easy way to start, as you only need to have nectar plants. A lot of people think of a butterfly garden, just nice colorful flowers for nectar. Hopefully by the time we're done today, you'll think a little bit more of that and provide for complete life cycles. A little bit about butterflies, or one thing about them to understand. First of all, they feed through a tube called a proboscis, which is coiled up there in that red circle. And here's what it would look like close up. Think of a proboscis as like a drinking straw. They uncoil this and stick it into the flowers to sip the nectar. Keep in mind that although many species will come to any nectar-giving flower, native species are always better. And some of the possible reasons for that is probably better nectar, more of it at times. Some of our hybrids do not have the nectar quantity or quality that natural species do. Less pest problems, easier to grow with less water when planted in the proper conditions. As with any plantings, when choosing plants, match the plant to the conditions. And with native plants, this works really well. Once you get past maybe the first season and the roots are established, you can eliminate pretty much any watering or maintenance other than occasional weeding to keep things in control. Butterflies like to feed on flowers that they can rest on while feeding. Composites are very popular, as well as flower heads with large other flat surfaces like umbels, and also for clusters that allow for the butterflies to sit or hang while they're feeding. A few examples of natives, and this by no way is an exhaustive list, but just a few examples of natives that might be good to start with for nectar. The Rudbeckias, this is Rudbeckia hirta, black-eyed Susan, very common biennial, short-lived perennial, but butterflies love. Pretty much anything in the asters. Goldenrods, and this is actually stiff goldenrod, Solidago rigida, which is not clonal. So if you're thinking of these fields of goldenrods that take over everything, there are species of goldenrods that are very useful that are not clonal. They stay put where you put them. Monarda or bergamot, and any of the milkweeds. You probably are not going to be able to obtain all of these. In fact, I'm sure you're not. But these are all the native milkweeds in Michigan. So we have 11 native species. 3 of those are threatened, 1 endangered. As of last July, my quest to find all the native milkweeds in Michigan was complete. And I would just read from right to left across the top row to move down which species they are so you get an idea. Clasping milkweed, poke milkweed, prairie or tall green milkweed, and swamp milkweed. Then the endangered dwarf milkweed, purple milkweed, and then Sullivan or smooth milkweed, and common milkweed. Then the last row is butterfly weed, world milkweed, and green milkweed. So there is quite a diversity of colors and growth habits in milkweeds, but all of them would be beneficial for nectar and as well as larval for monarchs. Any of the silphiums like cup plant, compass plant, rosinweed, all these are good nectar sources, and they can add some height in your garden. And all the Laetris or blazing stars are really good butterfly magnets. All the Laetris are native to North America, and so they are good native choices. Provide nectar sources from early spring on through the summer and fall. And I'll back up here just a minute. I have seen butterflies, and especially giant swallowtails that make it this far north in the spring nectaring on the wild geranium that you see pictured here. Provide a variety of heights. Some of the smaller butterflies may stay lower to the ground and not fly very tall at all. A good example is the Carner blue. Probably never goes more than a couple of feet off the ground, and it stays low, hiding down in the vegetation and grasses and the prairies. So you can provide for some of these smaller as well as the larger butterflies. The inner circle here is planted with strawberry and pussy toes, which is genus Antonaria, which provide low nectar sources in the spring and early summer for some of these small butterflies. There are other creeping plants that can work as well. Because of the way butterflies see, we should use flowers with solid colors like yellow, blue, lavender, or purple, white, and orange, as well as plant in groups for masses. Butterflies do not see color as we do. They see at another end of the ultraviolet spectrum. So these yellow flowers could actually look just like dark to them, almost a black and white. And some of what we see is lines or veins in the petals actually show up as darker lines to the butterflies. So we've listed nectar, but some other sources of food for butterflies. And some of these you may not want in your yard, but these are things that some butterflies do draw nutrients from. Dung. I have seen them feeding where people have let their dogs do their business in parks. Carrion, such as rotting meat, rotting wood, rotting fruit, such as bananas or tree fruit, and then tree sap. And if you look in the center, basically straight left of the word tree sap, there is one of the angle wings there drinking maple sap. This was taken in Portland State Game Area in April of this year. Another basic need, excuse me, for reproduction in some species can be met with a wet sandy area. Butterflies will congregate at a wet shoreline or lake or stream or at the edge of a mud puddle to take in salts and amino acids. This is known as puddling, and swallowtails are well known for this practice, but there are other species that will do it as well. I did not put a picture in here of it, but I saw in the UP last summer several yards, even hundreds of yards down a gravel road where it was moist, European skippers all in that edge, getting something out of the edge of the road, out of the moist sand. Another need of butterflies is that of shelter. They need protected places to hide or roost at night and in cool, rainy weather. Grassy or weedy looking areas can provide this cover. Some species, such as a mourning cloak, overwinter as adults in leaf litter, under loose bark, or in log piles. Most overwinter butterflies that overwinter as adults are woodland species. And this particular butterfly adult can live 11 months. Back up here. Keep in mind that some species may pupate in or near the ground in leaf and plant litter at the base of the current year's stems. If you want to keep butterflies around and continuing, they need a place to go from larva to adult. And also keep in mind that too early or over spring cleaning can eliminate wintering butterflies. If we clean up too early, you may remove some of those eggs, even larvae or chrysalises that are there. Also keep in mind that depending on the species, they will overwinter either as adult, young larvae, or chrysalis, and in some cases as eggs. Now let's look at some practices for providing for the complete life cycle, the egg, larvae, chrysalis, and adult. Some adults may only live a few weeks. Some will live for months. And this is a black swallowtail, which if they're around are pretty easy to attract just by planting dill and parsley and carrots. By providing the appropriate plants for larvae, you'll also be providing shelter sources as well. Many host plants can double as nectar sources. This is a giant swallowtail larvae on prickly ash. 5 main plant types for host plants are trees. If you have trees, especially native species, then you have a start. You can or likely hosting something already. Doug Talamy found that native oaks can host over 400 species of insects, while non-native oaks host only 4 species. So right there, you can begin to see the importance of native species. And we're finding that as we are replacing native species in the landscape, we are losing native insects, not only butterflies, but other insects as well. And down the chain to our songbird numbers and populations have plummeted because of this. These trees also not only could host butterflies, but many moths, as we have many more moths in Michigan than we do butterflies. Shrubs. Blues, like you saw in the previous picture, will host on the flowers of dogwoods, and the adult will nectar on them. The eggs are laid in the buds, and then the larvae eat the flowers and young fruit. So part of the research that we need to do is, in picking our plants, is also the butterflies we think we might attract. What part of the plant do they eat? Vines, grasses, and sedges. And this can help with shelter. And forbs or herbs. Herbs in the parsley family, as I mentioned, like Alexander for natives, are for black swallowtails. You may need to learn to share some of your garden with the larvae. One of the first things we need to do is to learn to not pick off everything that we see until we know what it is. I know a lot of people don't like anything in their gardens but plants, but if you're going to want butterflies, you're going to have a lot more than just plants. Look in field guides and natural areas around your home. Don't expect to attract what's probably not in your area, although an occasional stray may grace your garden. Michigan Butterflies and Skippers by Mo Nielsen is an excellent source to know what's in your area. As you can see here, there are county maps, and also he will tell you what the host plants are, what plants the larvae are going to eat. But use this information to determine what you can provide for host plants and what you possibly can attract. This page is the red disc alpine, and you can see it is in kind of central western upper peninsula. So you're not going to attract that to southeast Michigan. But so be realistic and then enjoy any surprises that might come along. As I previously mentioned, some species like the Carner Blue are host specific, while others use a wide range of species. Others like the Painted Lady aren't as picky, using over 100 possible host plants, some exotic, including some exotic used in hanging baskets and planters, as well as natives. One of the biggest problems becoming right now, excuse me, with using those non-natives is when you go to the nursery here and buy like licorice vine, which is actually good for attracting this, they have been using systemic insecticides, and therefore you will kill off anything that's eating it. So I would suggest that you try to get them from a source that's not using these insecticides, or to grow them out and try to keep them over the winter so that you can get that out of the system and then have a source of food. The zebra swallowtail host on pawpaw. So southern Michigan is a possibility for that, although personally I have not seen them in Michigan since I was a teenager. Giant swallowtails will host on prickly ash, wafer ash, and rue, and members of the citrus family. I will warn you, if you're going to grow rue, that you could have a photosensitive dermatitis situation. I found this out the hard way. When I had rue in the garden and did not realize this, I kept bumping against it and wonder where these blisters are coming from in my arms. So if you have it, just wear long sleeves and avoid skin contact, but it will attract giant swallowtails quite well. Monarchs are attracted to milkweeds for their eggs. There has been much interest in providing milkweeds and saving the monarch butterfly. While monarch and many other species readily nectar on milkweed, we also need to keep in mind that adult monarchs need other nectar sources in late summer and early fall after the milkweeds have bloomed, as they prepare for their journey south. It is good to provide the milkweed to attract them, but then plant other plants on through September, early October for nectar sources, as these adults need to feed after you've allowed them to go through their cycle. Some basic landscape principles geared for butterflies. Should be open and sunny, but can benefit to be a little sheltered from strong winds. The woodland butterflies you will see in open areas in the woods, so not completely sunny, but they will be in those warm areas because butterflies do need to be warm to fly. But you can also garden wherever it fits into your yard, whether large or small, and you will have a chance of attracting something. As I said, butterflies need to be warm to fly. If they appear to be sitting and resting with wings open, they are likely warming their body temperature. Optimum temperature for flight is somewhere between 82 and 100 degrees, and they will just sit there absorbing the sun. The scales on the wings not only are for color, but are solar receptors to warm the body. Natural areas are ideal, but not practical or possible for most of us. If natural conditions do exist on your property, take advantage of them and use them. If you have room, create as natural of an area as possible, taking advantage of the conditions that exist and are complemented, there we go, by surrounding or nearby natural areas. This was my backyard probably about 15, 20 years ago. Looking toward the house, doesn't look quite the same today. Things have grown up more. The trees are much larger. Prairie is filled in. I have about a half an acre, so on the back, I have been developing a natural woodland, replacing non-native Scotch pines with native hardwoods, which will all attract butterflies and moths, as well as I want the native plants. Then I have this small area of native prairie plants before I get into a vegetable garden. So there's really one big butterfly garden here. For many of us, just simply incorporating some of the desired plants into our existing gardens will work. And that may be all you want to do, and that's fine. Like I said, determine how much you want to do and what your goals are, and use that to guide you. This is the swamp milkweed in one of my gardens. So just even a few plants may attract some butterflies. And again, how big should your garden be? Depends on how much space you have and how much you want to put into it. If you have the space, make a larger garden with as many desirable species as you can. You may just be able to add the appropriate ones to the landscape. I will mention this one a couple times. This is a butterfly garden that I designed and we installed at our library here in Hudsonville. And I will tell you about this site in a few minutes, because it might encourage you if you have a poor site. You can also attract an occasional butterfly to planters on a deck or patio. They do seem to favor the more fragrant flowers and species. And when I say species, I have grown species petunias, not hybrids or cultivars, and species geraniums. And both of those have attracted butterflies on the deck. So take a look at what you can offer. If you even just have an apartment with a balcony or deck, you can still do something. A few features that you can incorporate into the garden to meet needs of butterflies: rocks or stone for basking in the sun to absorb that heat. As you can see, even smaller rocks can give butterflies a place to rest, recharge your body temperature. Moist area for puddling. A pail sunken in the ground and filled with small stones covered with sand and kept wet can also serve this purpose. I notice from time to time in my vegetable garden, after I water and the ground is wet, butterflies will come in and puddle. Some butterflies draw the nutrients from moist rotting wood, so some natural wood chip mulch can add a source of both moisture and nutrients. and also keep moisture for your plants. Some field guides list the types of soils that certain species of butterflies are found in. In reality, the preferred host plants are found in these soils. Consequently, so are the butterflies. Check your soil and plant according to existing conditions, such as dry, wet, sand, clay, etc., just as you would with any other plant. Also, keep in mind how much sun does the site receive during the day, both for the plants and the butterflies that are more likely to be where it's sunny. Plant according to conditions rather than watering excessively. You may need to water some at first year until the plants are established, but if using native plants for the conditions, they will survive and thrive. This is the butterfly garden at our library. Each year it fills in more, but there used to be a building on this site, and when they tore it down, they filled it with poor fill sand and a couple of inches of hard, rocky topsoil. We can't even hardly grow a lawn in this site. But by matching dry sand prairie plants to this garden, it has been very successful. So especially native plants for the conditions can be very successful. One of the ways native plants can survive in these poor sites is their root system. If you look to the far left on that line is your lawn. Your lawn at best is going to have 3 maybe inches of root, where many of these native plants can go down as much as 15 to 16 feet. And so that helps with acquiring nutrients as well as moisture. And also an added benefit is, especially these prairie plants with those deep roots, will drain off and absorb a lot of rainwater, as much as 6 inches per hour. So you can control some flooding with these as well. You may need to consider some changes in landscape and pest management. By mowing higher and not eradicating every weed like clover, you have some possible food sources for butterflies. I don't necessarily recommend leaving crabgrass, although it is a host plant for some of the skippers. It is interesting that if we go back and look at some of the original lawn mixes, clover was always included with grass seed, and you can start to buy that again. So that's a good nectar source. Not so much butterfly, but possibly some butterflies would lay their eggs on it, but maybe some of the moths as well. And is there anything really wrong with an occasional thistle or some other so-called weed in an out-of-way place in the garden? Although my wife didn't appreciate the 6-foot thistle in front of the picture window that I left one year. Some things that thistles are used for is a host plant for a few different butterfly species. Also, butterflies love to nectar on thistles. It is a finch feeder, as they will eat the seeds in the summer. And then finches nest usually in August. So by then they can get the down, the silk out of here to line their nest with. Where appropriate, leave some plants fill in or hang down, providing shelter areas for butterflies. Butterflies are not looking for unnatural manicured gardens to visit, even though they will visit them. They're going to be more at home where they can fill in. Even manicured gardens, if the plants are thicker, gives them a place to shelter. A little bit about pest management. First of all, are they really pests, or is that our perception? I learned that a lot of things, it's how we perceive them as to whether they're a problem or not. Can you learn to tolerate a few or handle them differently? Determine what it is, and is it really causing a problem that needs to be dealt with? It's like wasp and hornets. Even Michigan State recommends that if their nest is not in an area that's causing a problem, leave it, because they are part of the natural ecosystem. And I'll mention part of that here in a moment. What I have circled there is a black swallowtail larvae on dill. And if you look off to the left, there's another one hiding back there. They tend to show up in my garden later in the year, but then they will overwinter in there. I would assume or sure that many of you are familiar with IPM, or integrated pest management, which is the use of all appropriate and economical strategies to keep pests and their damage to acceptable levels with the least disruption in the environment. And this one really is big for me, is I tolerate a lot of things in the garden and outdoors because it's part of the natural system. And if we go to the stores, they were going to sell you things to make money, not necessarily best timing. And even if you check with Michigan State Extension on when to treat certain things, you're probably going to get a different answer than you will at some of the supply places. I see people just randomly putting insecticides and herbicides in their lawns and their gardens. You really sometimes don't even need to do this because the pest is not there and you're adding toxins to the soil. I really learned this when my children were younger and found that some of these sprays I was using to control ants in the house actually do not break down for many years. And so as young children are crawling and getting that, they put their hands in their mouth, they're getting access to that. Also, if you have pets, you need to keep in mind that whatever you spray out there to kill something may affect your pet in a negative way. So limit the use of pesticides. They kill butterflies at all stages, and herbicides kill the plants that they depend on. Pesticide use can also have unintended consequences, especially from over or improper use. Remember, everything that you do has an effect on something. And I've really been thinking of that this year as I see people spraying. A year ago, even a commercial spraying on a farm on a very windy day drifted herbicide into my son's mini orchard. And what the directions on these labels are federal law, so you can get in trouble for misuse. It has been said that there are 10 times the amount of chemicals used per acre on lawns and golf courses than on farms. Use more natural, less harmful means. Check all the effects of what you are doing. Is it intended, or on the sellers? Are the sellers telling you that you need it? Over the past 50 years, the use of fertilizers, including nitrogen, phosphate, and potash, has increased nearly threefold. In annual surveys conducted since 1994, 42 to 71% of food samples have shown some detectable amounts of pesticide residue. I'm not saying don't use these things, but be very careful how you use them, when and where. Like herbicides, we put down these herbicides in our lawns and our gardens year round, but the most effective time on many of the plants is actually in the fall when the plant is producing food and sending it down to the roots. So if you spray this in September, a lot of times you will kill more weeds in your lawn than you will right now with the same chemical. It is estimated that less than 0.1% of insecticides applied actually reach the target pest. But that also means that there are some reaching non-target pests. One example of this, while effective, the spraying of BT for control of gypsy moths, which are probably going to be up this year, will also kill any other insect that ingests that chemical, that pathogen. So keep in mind what the actual results of what you're doing are. 24 out of 25 of the most common pests are only problems because pesticides have killed their natural predators. By allowing diversity and a natural balance of beneficial organisms, pests can be kept in acceptable balance, doing little or no harm. You will learn to tolerate some wasps, some hornets, maybe some other insects that we have been told are bad, but they can actually be beneficial. And natural balances, generally, you may get a year where things are high, but if a natural balance is built up, you'll have many fewer pests and many more beneficial insects. Yes, many of the beneficials do prey on and parasitize butterflies some amount, but the benefit can far outweigh the damage. If you think about the large volume of eggs butterfly and moths lay versus the small number of adults that we actually get, you will figure out that they're going somewhere. And a lot of that is they are food for other organisms, whether it's spiders, wasps, hornets, birds. The vast number of larvae are intended for food for other organisms. And one thing I will tell you, if you find larvae in your garden, don't mess with it too much, because you're probably telling birds or something else where it's at, and the next day it may not be there. Because I raise butterflies in cages to photograph and release, I've learned to, as soon as I find them, to bring them in, because if I wait till tomorrow, I may not find them. Hornets and wasps, as I've mentioned, they prey on larvae, and so they can be beneficial. They also can be pollinators, some of them. This one I have taken a disliking to in recent years, especially the large Chinese mantis on the right. These are often sold and released into gardens for pest control as beneficial insects. But it is a voracious consumer of beneficial insects, including butterflies and bees. In our prairie at our nature center here in Hudsonville, we have had many butterflies and pollinators over the years, and then a few years ago, they just kind of dropped off and couldn't figure out why. And then during the winter, as I'm walking through the prairie, one day I collected over 100 of these Chinese mantis egg cases. And so now, by controlling those, removing them every time we see them, our butterflies and our other pollinator populations are beginning to come back up. Neither the European nor the Chinese mantis is native to this continent. We have one native mantis in eastern North America, the Carolina mantis, but it is not known to necessarily be in Michigan. And it is actually much smaller even than the European mantis. And of course, birds consume massive amounts of insects, including many butterfly and moth larvae. It literally takes hundreds of larvae to feed young birds, as well as the adults. So you can begin to see how butterflies and moths, when they're laying hundreds of eggs, you only get a few adults as a result. So reduce pesticide use, there should be an either, by hand pulling weeds and picking of pest insects when possible. Even Michigan State Extensions recommends with Japanese beetles to hand pick them, put them in warm soapy water. Yes, it takes time, but you're not harming anything else in your garden. Spot spray when possible to use less chemical and affect less of what you are wanting to attract. Plant thicker plantings to shade out weeds. And butterflies will love this, as they have places to hide. It has amazed me how some of the butterflies I find in prairies can disappear so quickly because they drop down into the vegetation to hide from predators and to be safe. As we near the end here, a couple questions. What do you plant? The first thing is, what do you want to attract or accomplish? That needs to be answered first. And then, what does your site conditions dictate? We wanted to attract butterflies in general to this garden, anything that would be in the area. So we started with looking at dry sand prairie plants that would be good for pollen or nectar, and then went through and looked at those same plants and other plants that fit the conditions that would be good for host plants for butterflies that might be in the vicinity. Remember variety. Use grasses, trees, shrubs, and flowers. All of these are good host plants, as well as can be good for nectar. Urban landscapes can be good for butterflies. If you already have native trees, you may need just to add some other plants. What works in natural areas around you? Go out and visit natural areas and take notes. I keep, for the last, I don't even know how many years now, a running list each year of what plants I see butterflies nectaring on. And so, and that list continues to grow, but go out and observe butterflies in their natural habitats if you can, and see what plants they're using. If they're using a particular plant down the road from your house, that's a good one to start with. And again, if you already have them, use already existing natural areas if they're available. You can enhance or add plants to gardens for maximum results. If you are starting with a clean slate, incorporate both nectar and larval host plants for butterflies that might be in your area. Match the plants to the conditions for best success with plant survival. This is the plan for that garden that we've put in at our library. It's good if you have a large area. It's probably a good idea to draw this out so you get an idea of how many plants it really takes and what you need. They don't have to be planted exactly as you draw out. You can imagine a place like this with high school kids, not everything landed in exactly the right place, but it gives you an idea of what you're going to need and can start to visualize what it's going to look like. I just will back up. The path that's in gray is a hard surface with stone dust. So that's also a nice open warm area that butterflies can sun in. So we will finish up with a few potential butterfly visitors that you could attract here in southern Michigan. Depending on where you live and what habitats are near you. Again, this is only a sampling of the many possibilities. Morning cloak, especially if you have wooded parks or areas with a lot of trees, you could attract morning cloaks. Tiger swallowtails, like woodlands, parks, urban areas. And again, the part of the woodlands that are attracting these butterflies are the host trees. So if you have those host trees in your yard, some of these larger butterflies will fly several miles looking for places to lay eggs. So if you have the native oaks or maples or cherry in your yard, you will likely attract something. Black swallowtail, as I mentioned, will host on parsley family, especially attracted with dill, carrot, or parsley. And there are native members of that family that they will host on as well. Spice bush swallowtail, parks, urban, open woodlands, and edges. And again, they're attracted to sassafras and spice bush, which is trees and a shrub. Wood nymphs, like grassy fields and grassy woodland edges. For years, I assumed that these were a woodland edge plant. And then when we established a 6-acre prairie in our nature center, I figured out that they are a grassland butterfly. But the reason I'd been observing them on the woodland edges is because that was the only place with grass. Like farms, we clear everything else. And if you have a grassy fence row, you likely will find some of these wood nymphs or satyrs in this group. And this is one that is very difficult to observe at times because this group, they come up, they see you, they go right down into those grasses, and it's really hard to find them. The fritillaries, this is great spangled, open woodlands, urban parks, and one of the reasons it likes those open woodlands is it hosts on violets. All fritillaries nest on some species of violet. This is why, even though we consider blue violet to be a weed, I do leave some in my yard hoping to attract these. The viceroy likes open areas, parks, urban, with willow and poplar species for host. So again, even though woodlands are listed as one of the habitats, it's the trees that are drawing them there for their host plant. I do not have a picture of it, but just a week ago, we found what I believe is the red spotted purple larvae on chokecherry in an open wooded area. Hair streaks, grassy meadows and prairies, and usually associated with some oak. Pearl crescent or American copper, grassy meadows, urban gardens, yards, and parks. And everybody's favorite, the monarch, which can be attracted to any open areas with milkweed. I'm going to take this down. I'll stop the share here.
And we also have a couple of questions in the chat box when you're ready.
Okay. All right.
All right. One, you probably hit on this a little bit. Which plants are good sources of nectar in the fall? Mary Ellen did put in there asters, goldenrods, and also cup plant. Do you have anything to add to that?
Those would be the best. Possibly if you're in a wooded area, some white snake root possibly, which tends to grow along river floodplains, but would probably do well in a moist garden. But asters and goldenrods, silphiums are very good late season and probably the most popular.
Excellent. Also, Craig, Patrick asked, could you name some online resources to get a better understanding of native plants to attract butterflies by county in Michigan?
I don't know of any right off that are tied to butterflies, but as far as what plants are native to your county, michiganflora.net. When you look up each species, there will be a map of Michigan and there will be dots in the counties that those plants are documented in at the herbarium from the University of Michigan. Unfortunately, probably printed field guides are your best. And Mo Nielsen's Michigan Butterflies does show counties. And I'm thinking, let me look just quick here a second if I can get this up. There might be one other one. Let me take a quick look on this computer.
What was that website again? I'll type it into the chat.
Michiganflora.net. And let me make sure that's. Yep. I thought I had a site here. No, I don't. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I don't know of a website right off that would tie the plants and the butterflies together in Michigan. Thought I did, but that's not what it's doing.
Super. Well, I put that one in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions? Would you like to raise your hand and ask versus typing into the chat, just in case we might have anybody who's on the phone or not chat savvy in the chat box? Knowing that we don't do this every day. We'll give it just a minute. Craig, these are beautiful, beautiful pictures, beautiful information. Thanks for also going over integrated pest management. I went through the Master Gardener classes too, and they always have a great overview and to really understand that whole cycle of the natural balance that's so important. Let me say, oh, Mary Ellen did put in the chat box another resource, which would be the nababutterfly.com/regional.
Yep, North American Butterfly.
North American Butterfly Association, which just typed.
Yep, known as NABA. Yeah, I've been a member of that for years. They put out some really good publications as well on gardening and butterflies in general.
Excellent. Pat, I see you've got your hand raised. I can actually see you. If you want to unmute, and then Mary, I've got you next. Pat, you have to unmute.
I wanted to ask about the asclepsis. I have orange ones up at the cottage, and that's in on a lake, on Lake Huron. Can I get the pink ones anyplace?
Yeah, some of the native plant nurseries will sell them. Actually, you can buy some of those at regular nurseries as well. If you're on a lake, the swamp milkweed as pink would be a very good choice.
Yes. Thank you.
And Mary Ellen also put in the chat that you can get it at Denowitz.
Oh, thank you.
I want to know if he knows the name of that little red insect that was in a big cluster, and if it's a harmful insect or a good one.
That's a perception one. This box elder bug. They're probably more of a nuisance than harmful. As in the fall, they congregate in masses, and if they can get into your house, they will do so. It is generally considered a pest, but if you don't have box elder trees within a distance of your house, it's not a problem.
I had one on a lily plant and I watched it for about 3 days, just sitting there, and then it went to another plant and there was a hole in the leaf on the lily plant.
Excellent. Patrick, you have your hand raised. Thank you, Mary.
Yes, good timing here. My wife just planted a butterfly bush yesterday. And the question is, how about pruning that? Is that a good idea? And by the way, this is Budlia.
Yep.
That's it.
Usually if you prune them back in the spring to about 8 or 10 inches and let new growth come. If you don't prune them, they will continue to grow. They'll just get kind of large and kind of scraggly. But most people prune them back to about 8 or 10 inches in the spring.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Super. Any other questions before we wrap up our presentation today? Grace did say very good presentation, and thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great pictures. It's just one more boost into spring that we're going to actually see something going on out there. So thanks so much for sharing everything today. Mary Ellen said wonderful photos as well. I am going to remind everybody that this was recorded and we will send that out as soon as I have the link for any bits and pieces that you want to either for someone who didn't get here, or if you want to review something that Craig went over today. Don't forget that our next webinar series like this, the Zoom meeting, well, maybe it'll be live, will be in September. We're going to have Carolyn Miller talking about using native plants in urban settings. Don't forget, because we're going to keep reminding you that on May 25th, it's the annual planning of the annuals at the hall, and we'll be sending out more information about that. So Craig, thank you on behalf of all of Meadowbrook Garden Club for sharing your knowledge, your insight, your beautiful photos, and hopefully we'll all help to make this such a even more beautiful place out there. So thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic weekend and enjoy the beautiful weather.
Thank you.